Welcome. Over to you, Ralph.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to be with you on this second Sunday of the new year. And this is something of a first for me. I'm not a clergy person, but I've preached lots of sermons over the years, and this is the first one I've preached sitting all by myself in my bedroom, still wearing my bedroom slippers. So this is great fun. We should do this all the time. I'm also delighted that this got me reconnected with Kathy Baker. I got to know her years ago when her parents were the ministers at our church. And I enjoyed your singing just now. I've always thought that music was the best part of any worship service. There's there's a story about the minister who decided to start the service with a bit of a sing song, and the minister said, "Who can think of a hymn about joy?" Oh, well, immediately obvious suggestion, Beethoven's Ninth and all that. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee. Well, said the minister, how about light? Do you know a hymn about light? Oh, of course. Lead kindly light amid the, and so forth. So that then the minister said, now here is a tough one. Sex. Dead silence, not a sound. Finally, from the very back row, the tiny voice of 95-year-old Mabel. Precious memories, how they linger. There's a poem by J.M. Barrie that says, God gave us memories that we might have roses in December. 95-year-old Mabel had a bouquet of roses in her December. And among the memory roses that I am still enjoying is a Sunday service quite a few years ago when Patricia and Glenn Baker, Kathy's parents, were ministering at a church here in Kelowna. We have more snow than you do, so you'll understand this. They asked Bev and me to take the service on the first Sunday after Christmas so that they could schedule a nervous breakdown. But that Sunday, we woke up to about a foot of snow. Now, we had a four-wheel drive vehicle, so Bev and I would have no trouble getting to the church. But the first Sunday after Christmas, you see, was always had a light attendance. Not too many people would show up. And I think maybe that's why the Bakers thought it would be safe to invite me to preach. But with a foot of snow, would anybody show up? So probably no more than half a dozen, we figured. So we just have, a bit of coffee and a bit of a conversation and send them home. But no, there were about 100 hardy folks there, and they all had gray hair. These were the older pillars of the church. This, in fact, was the core strength of that congregation. As I looked out at those old people, I estimated that they probably did 80% of the work in that congregation, and probably they put 80% of the money on the offering plate. Now, if these people left, the church would collapse. We could lose any other age group, but as long as we retained that bunch of old geezers, the congregation would go limping along. And that's when it occurred to me that us oldsters have that great treasure of memories, all those roses in December. And that's when I realized that us old fogies are the most important people in the church. So take that, you youngsters. It's those of you who think of yourselves as old that I am talking to. If you're old, you're in my audience. But I am also talking to those of you who expect to be old someday, and that should be pretty inclusive, I hope. I'm a storyteller by profession. I read the Bible as a source of stories that have within them the distilled wisdom of an ancient people. And the passage set aside for that Sunday was the story of Anna and Simeon. Most people don't know that story, but it's one of the best ones related to the Christmas season. And the older I get, the more it speaks to me. Here's the story. It's not history, it's a story that was handed down, like so many of those old biblical stories, handed down because people sensed there was something beautiful and profound hidden within it. It's not history, it's not science, and it's just a story, and it feeds us. Now, Mary and Joseph, the parents of the little baby Jesus, they were observant Jews. And the Jews would always bring their firstborn son to the temple or the synagogue to dedicate him to God. Now, in the temple, the two parents of Jesus, they ran into Anna and Simeon, a couple of old people who were the backbone of much that happened in those days, just as the old people are now. And old Simeon had had a dream that he would not die until he had seen the promised Messiah. And when he saw the child Jesus, he knew instinctively that this was the one. Don't ask me how he knew. He just knew. This was the promised Messiah. Ah, he said, now I can die in peace. And old Anna was there too. She was 84, and she's pretty well lived at the temple most of her life. One look at that baby, and Anna had the same realization as old Simeon. And so she went around telling anyone who would listen about that child. Now, the point here is that these two old crocs, a half-blind, bent-over, white-haired old geezer, and a wrinkled old biddy bent over by her widow's hump, they had the wisdom to understand what this child was about. It wasn't their eyesight, it wasn't their education, it was their wisdom. It was that elusive, much neglected, undervalued gift of wisdom, the ability to understand beyond the obvious, the grace to believe what their heart told them must be true, the treasure chest of memories which give us the gift of wisdom, even and including the memories of pain and suffering. With them all we find the sweet perfume of those roses in December. And the fragrance of roses helps us to know and to believe that old age is not a disease. It's an achievement. It's an accomplishment. It's an honor. Now, many of you are members of that honorable estate, or so my spies have told me. And I'm calling on all of you silver-haired seniors to celebrate all you have been in your life, to enjoy the wisdom you have, even if nobody else thinks that you have a wisdom, to celebrate the life you have lived, and that includes all the pain as well as all the blessings, to embrace the future in whatever way it unfolds for you. Your badge of honor is your wrinkles. They are an achievement. They tell the story of your life. I'd like to hold up for you the words of Dag Hammarskjöld, the former Secretary General of the United Nations. He said, "For all that has been, thanks. For all that is to be, yes." I want to repeat that. For all that has been, thanks. For all that is to be, yes. So by now you know that I am convinced that old age is an ancient and honorable estate. I know that's an uphill battle against popular culture, especially as it is expressed through the advertising that tells you old age is something to be avoided at all costs, which is not only tragic to think that way, it's downright stupid because the only cure for old age is death. The tragedy is that many older seniors buy into that false mythology. They are ashamed of being old, and that is so very sad. So many seniors who have bought into that cruel fiction that aging is to be avoided, denied, sublimated, shoved down somewhere where it's out of sight. And those seniors are often walking corpses. They've died inside because they're too stubborn to fall down. Old age is not for sissies. You've heard that said before, and it's true. Old age comes with a load of crud, but also with a barrel of blessings. I am now a well-aged 87-year vintage. I am old. I mean seriously old, not some healthy 70-year-old playing golf in Florida. I mean old as in 80 or 90 or 100. I mean old with a decent set of wrinkles, see? I don't know exactly when I got old, but I woke up one morning and there I was in the bathroom mirror. I saw an old fogey, a geezer, an old coot. How did that happen? When did that happen? I went to bed the night before as a distinguished elder, decently gray, Dr. Milton, if you presume. Well, next morning, I woke up and I was just an old fart. I had just had a pacemaker installed. My heart wasn't pumping enough blood to my brain, said the doctor. And I didn't like it when my kids said they already knew that. A few months before, I'd had cataract surgery on both eyes, and I could see again. And then Bev, my life partner for 64 years now, decided to give up her driver's license. She had a close call, and she decided, smart woman, to quit while she was ahead. And Bev, too, had some tough news from the doctor. And then the house and the yard and the payments and the pills all became a bit too much. Next thing I knew, we'd sold the house we'd lived in for more than 30 years and checked into a senior's residence, the Dorchester here in Kelowna. The COVID pandemic has made us aware of how many seniors there are. Our numbers have exploded, and this is a new thing. Until a few decades ago, there were never very many really old people. A few, of course, but suddenly this age group, the 80 to 100, is the fastest growing demographic. There are far more of us old geezers and biddies than there ever were before. We are the wrinkled pioneers, and we're popping up like dandelions in springtime. Some people have called us the silver tsunami. Until our generation came along, most people died in their 50s and 60s. Sure, there was the occasional exception, like my grandma, who made it through to 83. But for most folks, there was no such thing as retirement. About the time I was born, way back in 1934, some mandarin in Washington decreed that the retirement age should be 65. There were a few lucky people who enjoyed many years after retirement, but most of the guys got their gold watch, sat on the front porch for a year or two, smoking a pipe, and then they died. It was the decent thing to do. The play is over, ring down the curtain. As for the women, well, things pretty much went downhill after menopause. That is, if they had survived having a dozen babies. Their job was simply to get out of the way. Nowadays, if you go down to Phoenix or Southern California or Florida, you can see mile after mile of trailer parks full of snowbirds from Canada and the US. That's a whole new phenomenon, a direct result of the healthcare, pension plans, and savings investments. And there's thousands more going on cruises or traveling around in motorhomes or volunteering for every worthwhile project under the sun, or at least they would be, except for this COVID thing. I think we should stop calling newly retired people old. 65 to 80 is an extended middle age. And in fact, the World Health Organization has just made that statement that 65 to 80 is an extended middle age. Like millions of others, Bev and I thought we became senior citizens when we hit 65. We were strong and healthy. We had a fine time traveling, doing hobbies, time with friends, enjoying grandkids. But that easy lifestyle comes to a crashing end for many of us sometime between 75 and 85, when we can't do the snowbird thing anymore, or the motorhome thing, or the cruise thing anymore. That's because, like Bev and me, sooner or later, seniors have a health or personal issue crisis that grounds them. And that's when old age really begins. Now, along comes COVID-19 virus, and it's doing its best to wipe out all of us troublesome oldsters who are sitting around soaking up your healthcare dollars. As I said earlier, I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories, and I like to collect stories. It's a lifetime habit. And I found myself collecting a whole batch of interesting stories from interesting and lively seniors. I mean, real seniors, people who are seriously old. And these are the old folks with whom we share our seniors residence here, the Dorchester. Their stories and stories from lots of other sources got all shoved together into a book called Well Aged. This, by the way, is the commercial, folks. Here's what I wrote in the book. Old age is awful. Old age is delightful. The best age is 82. Yes, it is. Old age is both the best of times and the worst of times. For some, it's pretty much one or the other, but for most of us, these are the best years of our lives, even though we could recite a litany about joints that hurt and disorganized organs. You don't really want to hear about my overactive bladder, do you? No, I didn't think so. People who like to do statistics do surveys about just about everything, and some of them did surveys that said 82-year-olds were happier people than anybody else. A couple of years ago, I was enjoying a cup of coffee after church when a young child came up to me. She was 4 or 5 years old. "Are you old?" she asked me. Well, I was kind of taken aback by the question, but I stammered out something like, "Well, I guess I am." And then she looked right at me and she said, "Does it hurt?" Well, that knocked me right back on my butt. I don't remember what I said, but I should have said, this is what I should have said. Yes, it hurts. It hurts like hell sometimes. And sometimes it's pure delight. It is the best of times and the worst of times. We need to take the pain of old age seriously because it can be very painful, but we need to also focus on the delights. If we focus on our lives, on all the crud that goes with being old, well, it'll be a totally miserable time for us and all those who we live with. Yes, of course, we'd like everything to be perfect. We'd like that COVID virus to get out of our lives. We'd like to stop all that saber rattling over in the Ukraine and the disintegration of democracy in the United States and that pain in my hip. And yeah, of course. Couldn't God have created a perfect world? Well, evidently God didn't, or maybe we need to redefine our idea of a perfect world. Remember that song a few years ago? It went something like, "I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony, grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle." It's a delightful song, but it's not totally very realistic. Here's a story I love. It's about a couple who loved golf. They lived for golf. They were both killed in a bad accident, and suddenly they found themselves on an absolutely beautiful golf course. Well, this must be heaven, they said. And sure enough, there was the perfect set of golf clubs, and they were on the first hole, and they teed off, and both of them shot a hole in one. And so they teed off again, and what do you know? They both shot a hole in one, and so on around the course, a perfect score. They were so delighted. Just then, someone that they thought must be the groundskeeper came by. "Oh, this is such a perfect golf course," they said. "We didn't dream that heaven could be so perfect." The groundskeeper gave them a long, penetrating look. "This ain't heaven," he said. There's a deep and holy wisdom to this wounded and hurting world we live in. I don't pretend to understand it, but I believe there is a deep and holy wisdom in the gift of life so many of us seniors have been given. Let us celebrate the life we have been given, whether we're 8 months or 18 years or 88 years. Celebrate the wisdom of creation, the holiness and beauty of life, especially our own life, affirming both the pain and the glory and the ministry we still have to each other. Taped to my computer, I have part of a poem written by Leonard Cohen. Many of you will know this one. "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." Once more. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Thank you.